Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Best Gundam Models, period, where I will show you how to paint Tyranid Termagants in the colors of Hive Fleet Kraken. So let's get cracking. First step, as always, is to shank our paint. And the first paint we'll be using is Citadel Wraithbone. And we are going to put this all over our model using a fairly old Citadel medium base brush. And we are putting this all over the skin and the chitin. Don't worry about hitting any other details. Catch the tongue too. And we will be doing 2 thin coats. And here is our model after 3 coats, 3 thin coats of Wraithbone. Our next color will be a contrast paint. It'll be Citadel's Skeleton Horde. And as always, we want to shake our paint, get it all mixed up before we put it on our palette. And for this, I will be using a WizKids Dungeons & Dragons base brush. And we want to use a palette to make sure our brush is not overloaded, and we will apply this all over the skin, making sure to get a nice even coat. And when working with contrasts, you always want to just paint an area, let the contrast settle as it may, and then leave that area alone. Otherwise, you will tear the paint and get a really ugly surface. I found that out the hard way. As you can see now, our model is completely dry, and Skeleton Horde has really defined the shapes and shadows of this model. Our next step will be to brighten it up a little with a dry brush of Ushabti Bone. Now to dry brush, it's just like in the last video. Going to get some on our brush and work it into the bristles on some paper towel until there's barely any paint left on our brush. And then you're going to gently swipe the bristles back and forth, catching all that raised detail. You can also use a circular motion. This is what your model should look like after the dry brush stage. If you're doing a horde of Termagants and want to get them done quickly, you can just leave it here. But for those special characters and large monsters, you're going to want to take it a step further. And for that, we will do an edge highlight of Screaming Skull. And for this step, I will be using an Artist's Opus size 00 brush. Once you have your brush loaded up, go on and pick out details such as the cheekbones, the jawline, and around these air holes. And just pick pick out any edge that would catch the light. And here is your model once you have finished that edge highlight. Our next step is to clean up the carapace where we might have gotten any contrast like I did up on the shoulder region there and on his left leg. And for that we will use Wraithbone. Wraithbone. This is our Termagant after the chitin has been cleaned up with Wraithbone. I also took the liberty of blocking in the soft joints and the vents in the skin, as well as the armor plates on the gun, the eye on the gun, and the vents on the gun, as well as the tubes connecting the gun to the arm for preparation for later contrast. So our first contrast paint will be Flesh Terror's Red. That will go on the chitin. And for this, we'll again return to the Dungeons & Dragons brush. We want to make sure our brush is not overloaded. And we just start applying it. We want to be careful not to touch any of the skin that we've already finished. Feel free to use a smaller brush if you need to. And this is what our model should look like after applying the Flesh Terror's Red. Our next step is to wash it with Citadel Nuln Oil or any black wash, such as Dark Tone from the Army Painter. Here is our model with the Nuln Oil applied. It is still wet, but while that is drying, we can apply another contrast. This time, Guilliman Flesh. And this will be applied to the joints and the vents in the skin, as well as the tongue and the tubes. Once those paint coats are dry, this is what our miniature should look like. The next step is to highlight the red, first with Mephiston Red. For this, I'll be using a Citadel medium layer brush. And the way we want to highlight this is just by making small lines on the chitin, as well as an edge highlight. Here's what your miniature should look like after the Mephiston Red stage. Our next highlight will be with Evil Sunz Scarlet. And we'll do very much like we did with the Mephiston Red. Just won't make as many lines. And here is our model after the Evil Sunz Scarlet stage. Next step is optional for small creatures like termagants, but for your larger monsters, and special characters, you'll definitely want to do this. And we will further highlight the Carapace with Fire Dragon Bright. I'm using my Artist Opus size 00 brush. And just want to dot this along the edge. And catch a few of the more prominent edges. And this will really make your chitin pop. And here is our Termagant after the Fire Dragon Bright stage. It's really starting to come together. Our next step is to block in the claws, hooves, gun, and teeth with Corvus Black. And for this, I will be using a Citadel small layer brush. Now you'll want to be careful to avoid the areas that you did before. Help if I showed this on camera. Which is exactly why I'm using a small layer brush. And here is our model with the claws and hooves all blocked in. Next, we are going to wash these areas with Nuln Oil. For that, I return to the Dungeons & Dragons brush. While that is drying, we can go ahead and highlight the areas that we painted with the Guilliman Flesh. For that, we'll use Citadel Kislev Flesh. And here is our model. The black area is all washed and the flesh area is highlighted. Now it's time to highlight the black areas. We'll start by using Mechanicus Standard Gray by Citadel. For this, I'm using a Citadel small layer brush. And here is our Termagant after the Mechanicus Standard Gray stage. Next, we will be using Dawnstone as a fine highlight on the black areas. And we're still using our Citadel small layer brush. On the claws, you just want to highlight towards the end. It'll make them look much sharper. Now here's our miniature nearly done. I also went ahead and dotted the eyes in with a little bit of Wraithbone using my Artist Opus size 00 brush. Now is the tidy up stage. I only messed up on the skin where I got a little bit of red on his head there and a couple other areas. So we'll go back to Ushabti Bone to tidy those areas up. And then it'll be time to base this guy. So, before we get to our final reveal, just wanted to cover a couple details that I missed. First, you'll want to dot the eyes, including the eye on the gun, with Imperial Fist. I used an undone yellow last time, but one of the eyes on the head turned out slightly more orange, and it really bothers me. And second, if you want to paint the little spots on the shoulders, we're going to use Citadel XV88, and we're going to use our size 00 brush from Artist Opus, and you just want to go ahead and paint little dots on the shoulder using the tip of the brush. This is an optional detail, but it can really make your miniature stand out. So with that, I'm going to finish the base and get ready for the final reveal. As you can see now, our miniature is fully painted in base and looks excellent. I hope you found this painting tutorial informative. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time on the best Gundam models, period.